Well, good morning to all of you. And it's nice to be here on Mother's Day, although I'm far away from my family. So we celebrated it last Sunday. I was sitting here thinking of my mother's family. She was raised on a little street called Murugappa Mugali Street in Puraswakam. And she had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. And one of the brothers, James, was supposedly a terrible businessman and ultimately drove his business into the ground. My mother used to tell me that he would loan a lot of money to people, hand it out hither and yon, and when his father would ask him, when is it going to be paid back, he would always say, Apro adjust panla, Apro adjust panla. He was always going to adjust it some other day, and it never worked out well. In a sort of a tangential way, that's been my family history. Mother's Day is Apro adjust panla. We'll have to do it another day. Birthday is Apro adjust panla. We'll have to do it another day. But now with 4 grandchildren, it's going to be hard to do that. And I notice every time I look at my itinerary, my wife has put down the grandkids' birthdays. So that means you will be home on that day. And thankfully, as I look at this year, I will be home for all of their birthdays. But happy Mother's Day to all of you. I know, speaking for myself, I would never have made it without my mother. And that is not just simply stated. If you read my story in the book, Walking from East to West, it was really she who rescued me and was my wall of protection. We lost her early when she was only 57 years old, buried now in the city of Toronto. She was an amazing woman, did an awful lot in her short life, and ultimately diabetes took her. It was uncared for and mismanaged, and we lost her quite early. But my compliments to all of you mothers. You play a valuable role almost anywhere I go, whether it's in prison or whether it's in school or universities. Somebody will tell a story that it was the faith of their mother. It was the faith of their mother. Many a man sitting here is probably in church today because of your wife. They'll always say, well, my wife took me to church, my wife found the church. That's the way it normally goes. And if you are here because your father brought you here, you are a rare blessing. But your turn will come in June. And on Mother's Day, we hear nice sermons about mothers. On Father's Day, we men get scolded and told how terrible we have all been. My son used to say, Dad, I hate going to church on Father's Day because everybody gets chewed out. But when we go to Mother's Day, it's all nice and beatific and beautiful. So this is that nice day. Enjoy it. And men, I hope you're doing the cooking and the cleaning up and all of that. Let them sit back and enjoy your meal, although they may wish they made it themselves by the time you finish your recipes. All that aside, I have chosen, therefore, a message to deal with the family. And here you are dealing with one of the earliest families recorded in history. You know, the book of Genesis is really the book of origins. People think evolution tells us the theory of origins. Don't believe it. Evolution says nothing about origins. It talks about processes that actually are put into place after something was already there. Evolution did not come out of nothing. There's always got to be the intelligibility. There's always got to be the alphabet before you get the dictionary. So that's not a theory of origins. The Bible gives us the theory of origins. In the beginning, God. And the book of Genesis is dedicated to tell us the story of the earliest families. Now, the Bible also says this: if everything God wanted us to know were to be put into a book, there would not be enough pages to contain it. And that's the truth. So here's what I want to say to you. If all that is important is to be put into a book and it's very selectively chosen, this family has to be an extraordinarily important family, especially for one man for whom we have about 12 chapters given in the book of origins. So nearly 1/4 of the book of Genesis tells us about this man called Jacob. And everything that you need to know about the gospel in its premonitions, in its progenitorial ideas, how it all started, is contained in the story of Jacob. A duplicitous man, a dishonest man, a man who was raised to run. The mother was very genuine in wanting to do what she did, but you cannot accelerate the course of history. You have to allow God in His time to do what it is that He wanted to do. He had revealed to them that the older was going to be served by the younger. And the mother then decided to sort of manipulate this thing and engineer everything about the future. And in the process, very nearly destroyed the family. There were mistakes made in this home. There are mistakes made in every home. One of your pastors was asking me before the meeting, how do I deal with all the violence that I see as I travel? It's a very good question. And so I had to pause in thinking about it. And I said, at different stages in my life, I have seen it differently. There's a maturing process in you. When I was 25, I was in Vietnam. I saw the horrors of war. I did not know how to respond to it. In my 30s, I was in Poland and saw the horrific consequences of the Holocaust. It was very hard to deal with. And now, as I am now in the sunset years of my life, I look at all the world and its problems, and all I begin to see is not just the symptoms of it, but the causes of it, the evil that is contained in the human heart that thinks it can solve everything by engineering people around you. It can't be done. The greatest struggle within every life is not on the outside, it is on the inside. It has to be dealt with here first. So in this home, as the father and mother were raising them, 3 mistakes were made. I look back upon my own family and wish there were decisions I had made differently. But in your younger years, as much as you think you know, you really don't know all that you think you know. And the years come and you say, I would have made a different choice if I had to do this all over again. The first mistake they made was playing favoritism with their 2 boys. You see, Esau was a hunter. He was an outdoorsman. He wanted to be the macho man. And the father, Isaac, liked that kind of a masculinity. Jacob seemed a tender-hearted guy, a fellow whose heart could be easily molded and shaped. And the mother was beginning to work on Jacob because she figured she couldn't mold Esau. She would work on Jacob. And the result was a favoritism of the father favoring one, the mother favoring the other, and these boys became mangled and animosity broke out between both of them. Very easy to happen. You see, the thing is, a human being is not a quantity. A human being is an entity. There is a difference between a quantity and an entity. The English essayist F.W. Borum, in his essay called The Sword of Solomon, said this. Listen carefully, it's brilliantly worded. Great was the wisdom of Solomon, for he demonstrated one day more vividly and dramatically than it had ever been demonstrated before the utter unreliability of mathematics on the higher planes of human experience. There is, in a sense, I suppose, in which twice 1 are 2, a sense in which 2 and 2 are 4, a sense in which many other propositions of this kind are partly, if not wholly, true. It is difficult to see how merchants and accountants and other excellent and well-meaning people could go back to their desks and counting houses if their faith in these arithmetical conclusions was seriously shaken. I hasten to say, therefore, that there is a plane of ledgers and cash books on which these propositions are approximately sound. But if you rise from that plane to a loftier one, you will find at once that they are actually untenable. They simply will not work. Solomon proves it at the city gate. It may be true that half a sovereign and half a sovereign make one sovereign. It is obviously untrue that half a baby and half a baby make one baby. Let the sword do its deadly work. Let it cleave this baby into 2 parts, and half a baby plus half a baby will represent but the grim and gruesome mockery of a child. 2 halves of a baby make no baby at all. On this higher plane of human sentiment and experience, the laws of mathematics completely collapse. When, for example, a man distributes his wealth among his children, he gives to each a part. But when a woman distributes her love among her children, she gives it all to each of them. I do not believe that any man who has once fallen in love will ever be persuaded that 1 and 1 are only 2. He looks at her, he feels that 1 plus 1 would be 1,000,000. I do not believe that any happy couple, into the sweet shelter of whose home a little child has come, will ever be convinced that 2 and 1 are only 3. Life has been enriched 1,000-fold by the addition of that one little life to theirs. And I'm absolutely certain that no pair from whose clinging and protecting arms their treasure has been snatched will find comfort in the assurance that 1 from 3 leaves 2. In the great crises of life, one's faith in figures breaks down hopelessly. In the great crises of life, one's faith in figures breaks down hopelessly. No. If you've lost a child, you're not just one less in your family. Your loss has been incalculable. Can never be reduced to numerics. You as a human being come as a composite. You are a whole entity. You are hardwired. You are put together as a unique individual that cannot be replicated, cannot be duplicated. That's why even in corporations, you can find a successor. You will never find a true replacement. A person is a unique individual and brings so many qualities that cannot ultimately be duplicated 1 for 1. And when she took her boy and moved him away from her brother and the father, and when he took his son and moved him away from his mother and his brother, chaos descended on that household, a chaos that we see almost to this very day, that has continued for millennia. Then not only did they make that mistake, there was a second mistake that was made. There was a breakdown in communication. The parents had not really communicated with the children in clear, uncertain terms. You know, we tend to make that mistake in our culture here. We take a lot for granted. We oftentimes have no idea what it is that's really going on in the lives of our kids. There's a silent storm brewing in many a teenage heart. I grew up in a very sheltered home before I got married, and when I got married, I was 26 years old. I don't recall anybody ever sitting down and telling me what marriage really meant and how I was to love my spouse. I had no idea. The whole idea of sexuality was so foreign to me. I had no understanding of it. I had no understanding of the purity of love and how to gently, you assume those things. Never had relationships that crossed boundary lines. But somebody should have sat down and explained to me what this all really means. We don't do this. We don't take the trouble. Oftentimes, we don't sit down with our children and let them incidentally open up on what is going on inside of them. We try to make it a formal sit down and, all right, I'm here now. What do you have to say to me? I've noticed when I go for a baseball game in Atlanta, you really don't go for a game, you go for the hot dogs. The game just happens while you're eating all the time. So hot dogs and popcorn for which you go. And yet I noticed in those times my son would talk to me more of serious things that incidentally would come up than if I'd ever said to him, let's go and have breakfast, I want to find out what's going on. Men and women are very protective, but become very transparent when they know it's a safe environment and they can unload and share with you the deepest concerns of their mind. There was no communication. For example, when Esau married a woman that was outside his faith, it tells me in 2 passages after the fact that he realized how deeply he had wounded his parents' heart on the spouse and the partner that he had chosen. You know, I would have thought, naturally, the dad would have said, you know, you don't do this. This is not what we really want. But the marriage had all been consummated, everything had taken place, and then Esau realized how deeply he had wounded his parents over this whole thing. In the most sacred relationships, the most important counsel is needed. In some ways, I failed in that in my own life. I just made assumptions. I thought answers were clear. I thought parameters were self-evident. They're not. When you're young, you make many mistakes. Somebody has said, young is what only youth is what only the young have, and only the old know how to use. Youth is what only the young have, and only the old know how to use. I'm involved in a serious counseling situation with people now in their 70s. The man keeps insisting he made a mistake when he was in his teens. And I said to him, and you're going to correct it now? You're really going to correct it now? The correction he was offering was unbelievable. I said, nearly 60 years have gone by, and now this is your solution to it? I said, think about it. You could be gone within 24 hours. When your correction is worse than what you say is the mistake that you made years ago. Fathers, mothers, talk to your children, and talk in a moment in which they are comfortable to be opening up in their own hearts, and let it see as truly a caring heart talking to a caring heart. The difference is the caring heart with wisdom is talking to the caring heart, which is still quite immature. Favoritism, breakdown of communication. Thirdly, deception. How he learned through manipulation and deception. We do that a lot, don't we? Half-truth. Yesterday, while we were coming into the country, because we told the truth, we got into trouble. Someone has said truth is stranger than fiction because we have made fiction to suit ourselves. We don't live with the truth. So if you make up a fictitious story, we're more comfortable with it. You tell the truth and somebody is not comfortable with it, because the truth often evokes all kinds of other reactions from people. My dear friend Prakash Yasudian, who passed away some time ago, lived here in Chennai, was our director. Prakash often used to tell me of the story of this father who was called into school because his son was going to be suspended for stealing pencils from school. So the father went to talk to the principal and said, what's the problem? He said, your boy, he's always stealing papers, paper clips, pencils, erasers, all this stuff. Father says, I don't know why he does that. If he wants any of this, I can bring it from my office for him. Why does he have to do it in school? And as soon as he said that, now you know where he learned it from. You bring it from the office, he brings it from school. The only difference is he got suspended, you didn't. We teach people how to manipulate, how to be dishonest. I had a friend in Delhi. I won't give you his name because people watch me on YouTube a lot, too much. They watch me, I don't watch myself. I don't know how to get onto YouTube. My friend Michael Ramsden said that YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook should come together and have a new call station called youtwitface.com. They watch on YouTube, so I'll be careful. This friend of mine, we were classmates in Delhi, and he arrived in Toronto, but he came in on a visitor's visa. And he was trying desperately to get a hold of immigrant status into Canada. And then all of a sudden, one day he invited my wife and me to his wedding. I said, I almost called him by name just now. I said, my goodness, you're getting married? He said, yes. I said, your dad and mom coming and all? He said, nahi, time nahi hai. I said, time nahi hai? Your father and mother don't have time to come for your wedding? Theek hai, it's okay, just come. I said, where is it? Which hotel? Nahi, basement. It's my friend's basement. I said, this is the strangest wedding. Your wedding is going to be in a basement. Your mother and father don't have time. Who's the girl? Miloge, you'll meet the girl. It should be okay. So my wife and I go, we're in a basement, about 25 others. We never got to see the girl. Her face was covered the whole time. And we get the burfi and all this stuff, the sweets and mutai, all this stuff is distributed. And I gave him a big hug. I said, this is the strangest wedding I've ever been to, but I wish you all the best, I didn't realize how strange. After that, I never saw him again. He vanished. He was gone. A few weeks later, I said, I think that was a fake wedding. I think this boy hired a bride to go through the process of getting immigrant status. We were good friends. Never seen him since that day. What a way to start your life with your spouse. Playing a game with the law and with deceit, rather than trusting the sovereignty of God. You must trust God in His sovereign ways, because you engineer situations. You will have to be responsible for the byproducts. Victor Manogaram, who used to live here, what a powerful man he was, Victor Christ director. I knew Victor from when I was a new Christian. He was so powerful. Never went to college, but because of Victor's ministry, myself and my brother-in-law, Sundar Krishnan and all, we came to know the Lord. Victor used to live in Chennai. Victor used to say, Ravi, remember the verse, that He has promised to keep that which you have committed to Him. He said, brother, if you're traveling with a suitcase and you're sitting in a waiting room and you leave your suitcase to go to the restroom and come back and the suitcase is not there, no point going to the lady behind the desk to ask her where the suitcase is. But if you checked it in with her and it is lost, you can go and ask her for it. The airline is only committed to keep that which you have committed to them. They are not responsible for that which you have not committed to them. He said it's the same with God. He has promised to keep that which you have committed to Him. He has not promised to keep that which you have not committed to Him. And so with the breakdown that came, the boys were moving in different directions. The irony of this is, while he is on the run, God has not abandoned him. You may be running from God right now. I want you to know He is on your trail. He doesn't give up on you that easily. That's what Francis Thompson wrote. I fled Him down the nights and down the days. I fled Him down the arches of the years. I fled Him down the labyrinthine ways of my mind. And in the mist of tears, I hid from Him, down titanic glooms of chasmed fears, from those strong feet that followed after. He wrote The Hound of Heaven. But he ran away from home. Francis Thompson, he was a genius. He ran away from home and lived in two places, Charing Cross, a hangout for the losers and the lost, where he would buy his drugs. He was an opium addict, never got into Oxford University because of his drug addiction. What a brilliant man. And in those days, people would get trapped into this habit. He would go to the dustbins in London, pick up the newspapers, get some paper, write a letter to the editor, and the editor would print in his newspapers that I'm getting letters from a greater than Milton who is living among us, but I have no return address. He would live in Charing Cross through the day, wrap his dirty raincoat around him by the River Thames and go to sleep at night. Charing Cross and Thames. And one day he was reading the story of Jacob. And as the hound of heaven caught up with him, he wrote this, O world invisible, we view thee. O world intangible, we touch thee. O world unknowable, we know thee. Inapprehensible, we clutch thee. Does a fish soar to find the ocean? An eagle plunge to find the air? Do we ask of the stars in motion if they have rumor of thee there? Not whether wheeling systems darken or our benumbed conceiving soars. The drift of pinions would be hearken, beats on our own clay-shuttered doors. The angels keep their ancient places, touch but a stone and start a wing. 'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that have missed the many splendored thing. But when so sad thou canst not sadder, cry, and upon thy so sore loss shall shine the traffic of Jacob's ladder between heaven and Charing Cross. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry, clutching heaven by the hems, lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesaret, but Thames. Yea, in the night, my soul, my daughter, cry, clutching heaven by the hands, lo, Christ walking on the water, not of Gennesaret, but Thames. His ladder is pitched in Charing Cross. His ladder is pitched intends. His ladder is pitched right here in this church. His ladder is pitched right by your bed and by your desk. You cannot run too far without the arm of God tapping you again and again and again and telling you, turn around. Turn around. Turn your heart towards home, the home for which God has made you. Life will never get right, never, until you first get right with God. One of my friends is here, Jared, who had the privilege of being his guest to see Wimbledon a couple of years ago. I never thought I would be in Wimbledon. The same year I got to Lord's, and I wished I hadn't got there. The Indian boys were being pounded out of their wits. And by the time I had lunch and came back, 3 wickets had fallen. I said, I'm heading home. I didn't come to see this match, Same year I got to see Wimbledon. You know what I found out? Players' dressing room. When they leave the dressing room to come up to the courts, what it says above the door for them, that victory and defeat are both impostors. Taken from Kipling's line, those two impostors. Victories and defeat are momentary. Only in eternity is true victory defined and true defeat defined. And so I say to you, you really want to be a winner. You really want to be a winner. Begin by communing with God. Communion with God. When I was growing up in Delhi, going to an Anglican church, I never knew what communion was about. The only thing I liked about it was that it meant the service was almost over. That's it. I knew once my parents came back from the front and knelt, within 10 minutes we'd be out of there. I didn't realize they were communing with the broken body and the shed blood of Jesus Christ. And this was his body broken for me. This was his blood shed for me. Comb the pages of any scriptures, you will never find what Jesus Christ offers to you to rebuild your life and keep your individuality distinct. He comes to fulfill in you the way he's made you, not to violate you. Communion with the living God. Secondly, he had reunion with his brother. He communed with God, reunion with his brother. This is fascinating. The Bible is so Eastern, Actually, you have to contextualize many of these stories in the West. In the East, we understand it exactly what this means. Kya ho raha hai? What's happening here? He's going to meet his brother. And his brother's a big boy. So what does he do? Go to the sweet shop to send the sweets ahead. Do you ever go to meet an Indian friend without sweets in your hand? You want the goodwill. You want the goodwill. I was traveling some years ago coming to Mumbai, and there's a guy in front of me and he had 3 bottles of wine in his bag. I said, are you allowed to bring in 3? He said, no, actually just 1. I said, now what are you doing with 3? He said, well, one is for the customs person and then I can take in 2. So he's coming down the jetway and one falls through the bag and breaks. And I was behind him. And he goes, ay, yo. He looks at that. So I said, whose was that, yours or his? Always want to make peace, don't we? So Jacob is sending offerings ahead to Esau, softening the boy up. And when he meets up with Esau, what does Esau do to him? He embraces him, forgives him. What does Jacob say? Here's the gospel prefigured. I see in your face the face of God because you have accepted me. You're not merely a man now. If you were an ordinary man, you'd want your pound of flesh out of me. You'd want a percentage of all that I have made. Instead, you have forgiven me. Grace is generous in its offering, with no claim to your possessions other than the generosity of your own heart. I see in your face the face of God. The forgiveness that God offers to you is so unique, so unique. Prodigal son story. Think about it. If you ran away from home and you took your inheritance, do you think your dad would come and meet you halfway outside? He'd say, let the rascal come in here. Get on his knees. Get on your knees. No, it's so counterintuitive. The father runs out and he says, this my son who was lost and is found, this my son who was dead and is alive. He's representing the heart and the mercy of God. I say to you, first, communion with God, second, reunion with your brother. Do you have anybody in your life that is unforgiven? My brother-in-law, Sundar Krishnan, always says, if there's anyone in your life that you have not forgiven, that person still controls you. That person still controls you. So I say to you, there are a few people in life from whom I find very hard to say I completely forgive you. But I really am not the kind of guy who would keep a grudge. That's not who I am. I've never been that way. I have other issues, but that's not been one of them. And so I just say to you, is your family estranged? Are there issues? Just offer forgiveness. It's up to them to know how to deal with grace and the generosity of your heart. Communion with God, reunion with your brother, and lastly, to transfer the trust to the next generation. You know, there comes a time in life when the energy needed to perpetuate the convictions held in a family demand the strength of a younger mind. Comes a time in every family's life where the convictions needed to perpetuate the family demand the strength of a younger mind. In many ways, that time has just about come in my own life. It's come where I have to sit down with the younger team members and tell them, you'll have to carry this torch. And I sit down with my son and tell him, son, read your family tree, find out from whence you came, and understand where you want to go with this and what the values are that we treasure. Some years ago, I was preaching in Hyderabad, and an elderly man came to me and he said, does the name Oliver Zacharias mean anything to you? I said, yes, that was my grandfather. He was the first professor of English literature at Madras Christian College in Tambaram, appointed by the British. I said, that was my granddad. He said, I looked at my wife as soon as you started to speak and said, he has to be related to Oliver Zacharias. He has that same sense of humor as Oliver Zacharias. So he came to me and said, does that name mean anything to you? I said, yes, that's my grandfather. And his lips started to quiver, and he said, he was my professor. I learned my English from your granddad. What a legacy to have. What an inheritance to have, to know that your father, your grandfather, your grandparents have run the race well. It's my turn now to hand over that baton. There's a comedian in the United States, her name is Irma Bombeck. Years ago, she was a very funny woman. She said she realized when her time had come, when she was sitting on the companion side of the car and her daughter was driving, and as she was about to put her brakes suddenly, she put her arm out to protect her mother. Always is the other way around. The mother or the father or the driver puts the arm out to protect the young ones. And now when your young ones put their arm out to protect you, you say, my time has come. I must transfer the trust to the next generation. My time is gone, so I will not belabor this, but I just want to say to you this. If you have fallen, if you have stumbled, rise up. God is willing to pick you up. God is willing to say to you, I am your strength. I am your sustenance. Your glory lies not in lying on the ground, but in raising up your hand to let him pick you up, put you into the place where he wants you to be. The greatest trophies of his grace are those that had fallen deepest into the pit. The greatest trophies are the ones that had fallen deepest into the pit. Saul of Tarsus to Paul is one of them. Peter, who denied the Lord and became that rock in his confession. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to ask you to do this. If you are far away from God, today, make it the day where you can say, I'm turning my life over to Him completely. I'm turning my life over to Jesus Christ to make me the man or the woman He wants me to be. If you genuinely mean it, you will walk out of here a different person. Will you bow your head and pray with me? Hear our prayer, O Lord. May many a person today, a young man, a young woman, a child, an adult, cry out to you and know that you are near them. May this day be the beginning of your new life in Christ. Communion with God, the union with whomever you need to rebuild, and the day will come where you transfer the trust. In Jesus' name, Amen. Just one suggestion. If you made that commitment this morning, tell somebody before the day is over what you've done and what it means to you. God bless you.